On the morning of June 8th, 793, the monks of Lindisfarne were at prayer. The tide was out. The sails on the horizon meant nothing to them yet. Within a few hours, the monastery was burning, the brothers were dead or in chains, and the gold of the altar was being loaded onto longships bound for the cold north. This is the moment Europe began to fear the sea. For the next 250 years, wave after wave of Scandinavian raiders, then armies, then kings, would land on English shores. They burned Canterbury, they sacked London, they carved out a kingdom larger than Wessex itself. If you find these lost histories worth telling, hit subscribe before we go further. Then something happened. The Vikings did not retreat. They did not sail home. And the moment their age in Britain ended, England as a country began. To understand what the Vikings found when they came, you have to first understand that England was not England. In 793, the island was divided into 7 separate kingdoms, a patchwork the historians would later call the Heptarchy. Northumbria in the north, Mercia in the Midlands, East Anglia on the eastern coast, Wessex in the south, and the smaller kingdoms of Kent, Essex, and Sussex clinging to the southeastern edge. 7 crowns, 7 armies. No fleet, no coordinated defense of the coastline, no single ruler who could call the whole island to arms. The kingdoms were also tearing themselves apart. Northumbria, weakened by civil wars, effectively fragmented into 3. East Anglia fell under Mercian control and lost its independence. Mercia itself reached the height of its power, swallowing Middlesex and Essex before plunging into civil war and never recovering. Meanwhile, Wessex did the opposite. It expanded quietly. It absorbed Sussex and Kent. It defeated the Mercians and pushed its border to the rivers Lee and Thames. Within 50 years of Lindisfarne, Canterbury had been plundered. So had Dorchester, so had London. Dozens of smaller towns had been burned and emptied. The kings of England were spending more time fighting each other than the men coming off the longships. And then in 865, a fleet appeared on the Isle of Thanet that was different from anything that had come before. This one had not come to raid. Between 5 and 10,000 warriors came ashore on Thanet. The Saxon chronicles called them the Great Heathen Army. The Scandinavian sagas named their leaders as the sons of the legendary Danish king Ragnar Lothbrok, Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan, and Ubba, come to avenge their father's execution. Historians today are skeptical of that legend. The truth was simpler. They had come to take land. Kent paid them off. East Anglia paid them off as well, and made a fatal mistake. The Vikings asked to winter there. King Edmund agreed. They used the months to build a fort and acquire horses, and by spring they were the most mobile army on the island. In 866 they moved on Northumbria. King Aethelflaed, too, had just won the throne from his brother Osbert in a civil war and was caught completely unprepared. The Vikings took York, renamed it Jorvik, and made it the capital of a new Danish kingdom. The brothers briefly united to retake the city. Both were killed. Ael, according to the sagas, was executed by the brutal blood eagle ritual. Mercia fell next, more or less. Nottingham was captured in 868. A ransom bought a temporary peace. In 869, the Vikings turned back to East Anglia. King Edmund met them at Thetford, lost, was captured, and was killed for refusing to renounce his faith. He was later canonized as Saint Edmund. 3 of the 4 major English kingdoms had fallen in 4 years. Stay with us. By 870, only Wessex remained. The Vikings, now reinforced by King Bagsec and a fresh contingent the chronicles called the Great Summer Army, sailed up the Thames and seized Reading. King Aethelred laid siege. He won small skirmishes, but when Bagseg's reinforcements broke through, the Saxons were sent retreating across the chalk downs. Then, at a place called Ashdown, something changed. The Saxons turned and fought. The charge that broke the Viking line was led not by the king, but by his younger brother, a young Aetheling named Alfred. Bagsea was killed on the field. The Vikings panicked and fled. Aethelred pursued them, was wounded in a minor engagement, and died shortly after. Alfred became king of Wessex. He inherited a kingdom on the brink. Within months, a new Viking warlord named Guthrum arrived with nearly 100 ships and 3,000 warriors. He had lost a throne struggle in Denmark and was hunting for a new homeland. He laid siege to Alfred's forces at Wilton. Both armies were exhausted. Alfred bought peace with the first of the great ransoms, the Danegeld, the Danish money. To pay it, he introduced a new tax. It was meant to be temporary. It became permanent. The Vikings withdrew to London, but did not leave. Alfred understood what was coming. He used the breathing room to begin a quiet revolution. He reformed the Saxon army. Instead of conscripting every man into a single levy that fell apart after a single season, he established a rotating system. 1 man in 10 would serve. The other 9 would keep the farms running and the kingdom fed. It was the foundation of a professional standing army. England had nothing like it. Neither did the Vikings. For a few years, the Vikings turned elsewhere. Halfdan moved north, crushed a Northumbrian uprising, and crowned himself king of Jorvik. Guthrum settled in East Anglia and declared himself king there. Mercia was carved in two, half under a Viking puppet, half held by a doomed Anglian rump. Then in 875, Guthrum came back for Wessex. He attacked from the south. He captured Wareham. He took Exeter. Each time Alfred laid siege, Guthrum negotiated, took the silver, sailed away, and came back. Then came the winter that nearly ended England. In January 878, Alfred was wintering at his royal estate at Chippenham, only a few miles from the Viking border. Guthrum saw the opening and took it. He attacked at Twelfth Night, when the Saxon court was deep in the celebrations of the Christian feast. Chippenham fell in a single night. The capital was overrun. Wessex collapsed. Alfred escaped with a handful of men. He fled west into the Somerset marshes to Athelney, a small island of dry ground in a wilderness of reeds and standing water, and there the king of Wessex hid like a fugitive while Guthrum occupied his kingdom. This is the moment the textbooks remember. The cakes, the legend, the lowest point an English king had ever fallen. But while Alfred was in the marsh, the Vikings were not winning everywhere. Down in Devon, Jarl Ubba, one of the original sons of Ragnar, was killed in battle at Sinwit by the men of Devonshire under Odda the Ealdorman. The tide had not turned, but it had cracked. Subscribe and stay with us. In the spring of 878, Alfred came out of the marshes. He sent messengers across Wessex. The men of Somerset, Wiltshire, and Hampshire answered. 3,000 warriors gathered at Egbert's Stone. Within days, the army had doubled. Guthrum, still at Chippenham, was caught completely off guard. He marched out to meet Alfred at a place called Edington and occupied the high ground at Bratton Castle, the old hill fort. The Saxons broke them. The remnants of the Viking army were besieged inside Bratton for 2 weeks. Starving, Guthrum sued for peace. The terms were extraordinary. Guthrum was to be baptized. Alfred himself stood as godfather. The Vikings were to leave Wessex and western Mercia, and England was to be divided. The border ran from London to Chester, along the old Roman road called Watling Street. South and west of it, the lands of the Saxons. North and east, the Danelaw, Denelagu in Old English, where Scandinavian earls ruled. Scandinavian law applied, and Scandinavian customs prevailed. It was not a single state. It was 3 rough zones. The kingdom of Jorvik in the north, East Anglia under Guthrum, and the lands of the 5 boroughs, ruled by a coalition of jarls who fought amongst themselves almost yearly. But Alfred was not done. While Guthrum settled into baptized retirement, Alfred kept building. He raised a network of fortified towns called burhs across Wessex, every village within a day's march of one. He commissioned a fleet of ships, larger and faster than the Viking longships. He had stopped reacting to the Vikings. He was now building the machine that would dismantle them. Alfred died in 899. His son, Edward the Elder, inherited the throne and the war. Edward did not fight alone. He partnered with his sister Aethelflaed, the Lady of the Mercians and Alfred's daughter, who had taken charge of Mercia after her husband was fatally wounded at the Battle of Tettenhall in 910, a battle in which a combined Saxon and Mercian army destroyed a Viking force from Jorvik and killed its king, Halfdan II. Brother and sister moved together. Aethelflaed strengthened the Mercian fortifications, built her own line of burhs, and in 917 led the campaign that recaptured Derby. Edward broke the East Anglian Vikings at Tempsford in 918, killed their king, and annexed the kingdom outright. Aethelflaed died the same year. Edward united Wessex and Mercia into a single realm and established a protectorate over Jorvik before his own death. Then came his son, Aethelstan. In 927, he captured Jorvik outright before a Scottish Viking coalition could intervene. In 934, he marched into Alba and plundered it. The response came in 937. A coalition of Scots, Strathclyde Britons, Dublin Vikings, and the Vikings of the Isles, over 10,000 warriors, invaded England. They met Aethelstan's army at a place called Brunanburh, the exact location of which is still debated. The English destroyed them. Olaf Guthfrithson and King Constantine too fled the field. Owain of Strathclyde was probably killed. Brunanburh was the moment. Saxons, Angles, Mercians, and Northumbrians had marched there as separate peoples. They returned as something new. They returned as the English. The Viking Age in Britain did not end the way the textbooks like to end stories. There was no last fleet sailing east in defeat, no surrender on a beach, no final dramatic battle that drove the Northmen back into the sea where they had come from. What ended at Brunanburh was something quieter and more permanent. The men who had landed at Lindisfarne in 793 came as raiders. The men who came with the Great Heathen Army came as conquerors. And the men who fought at Brunanburh fought not as Saxons or Mercians or Northumbrians, but as subjects of a single king of a single country. The Vikings did not vanish. They were absorbed. Their language survived in English place names ending in by and thorpe. Their laws lingered in the Danelaw for centuries. Their blood still runs through the eastern half of the country.